Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. Pakistan says occupied Kashmir and the Palestine disputes are the United Nations' most glaring and long-standing failures. Speaking via video link on the United Nations 75th anniversary, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shahmehmood Qureshi said the people of occupied Jammu and Kashmir still await the fulfillment of the United Nations commitment to give them the right to self-determination. Meanwhile, Indian troops have martyred another civilian in occupied Jammu and Kashmir's Budgam district. The youth was targeted during a cordon and search operation in Charare Sharif area of the district. The occupied valley is under India's crushing curfew and communications blackout for the last 414 days. Turkey has lashed out at an European Union decision to sanction one of its companies for allegedly breaching a UN arms embargo on Libya. In a statement, Turkish Foreign Ministry said the decision has no value in the eyes of Ankara. Earlier, the EU imposed sanctions on Turkish, Kazakh and Jordanian companies. The United States says it is building a coalition against Russia's Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline. In an interview, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Washington is working to form an alliance to stop the pipeline project. Pompeo said Germany must reconsider the project due to the security implications for Europe stemming from dependence on Russian gas. India's coronavirus caseload has surpassed 5.5 million after registering over 75,000 infections in the past 24 hours. The country has recorded 1,053 COVID-19 deaths, taking the toll to nearly 89,000. In Pakistan, 4 people died while 582 tested positive for the virus overnight as the country conducted the highest number of tests in a single day. Globally, the virus has infected more than 31 million people and claimed over 964,000 lives so far. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. We start from Pakistan, which says occupied Kashmir and the Palestine disputes are the United Nations' most glaring and long-standing failures. Speaking via video link on the United Nations 75th anniversary, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shahmehmood Qureshi said the people of occupied Jammu and Kashmir still await the fulfillment of the United Nations commitment to give them right to self-determination. Qureshi said today the United Nations is derided as a talk shop and its resolutions and decisions are flouted. The foreign minister said international cooperation, especially in the Security Council, is at its lowest. He pointed out the very forces that led to the Second World War, racism and fascism, have transformed into rising xenophobia and Islamophobia. Meanwhile, Indian troops have martyred another civilian in occupied Jammu and Kashmir's Budgam district. The youth was targeted during a cordon and search operation in the Charare Sharif area of the district. The occupying troops have also launched search operations in Srinagar, Pulwama and Shopian districts. The occupied valley is under India's crushing curfew and communications blackout for the last 414 days. Now, a year after shaking up global conscience over India's illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan is all set to address the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly on the 25th of September. Because of Pakistan's effective diplomacy, India's lockdown and oppression in the occupied valley have been widely criticized by all international forums. More in this report by our correspondent Isa Naqvi.
Due to the restrictions imposed by the local government in New York, there will be no in-person high-level participation from outside. Prime Minister Imran Khan will virtually address the General Assembly on Friday. Foreign Office spokesperson Zahid Hafiz said the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir will top the agenda of the Prime Minister's speech this year too.
The inhuman military siege, extrajudicial killings, communications blockade, media blackout, and restrictions on all forms of fundamental freedoms of Kashmiri people continue unabated. More than 300 innocent Kashmiris, including women and children, have been martyred by the Indian occupation forces during the last 1 year.
Experts are of the view that India has failed to achieve the objectives of the illegal annexation of Jammu and Kashmir region. Ambassador Ghalib Iqbal says India will not be able to silence the mounting criticism it is facing the world over.
And these people are under curfew for the last more than a year now. These people, when they come out, you think they are going to stop fighting? No, they will not stop fighting. They will fight with anger now. Because earlier it was ideology. The ideology coupled with anger is disastrous for any land. And India is going to face that.
Security analyst Imtiaz Gul says after failing to achieve its goals in Kashmir, India is emulating Israel by issuing controversial domicile certificate to non-Kashmiris.
Well, it looks quite obvious that India is following the Israel model of settlements in Gaza and on the Western Bank, and by bringing in Israelis and raising structures to permanently settle Jews in order to outnumber the local Palestinians. This is what the Indian government appears to be doing in Kashmir.
Experts say the UN General Assembly session is yet another opportunity to expose India's barbaric crimes in the occupied valley. They believe the time is ripe to highlight the plight of the Kashmiri people and seek world support to end the miseries being inflicted upon them. Reporting for Indus News, Isa Naqvi, Islamabad.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has strongly condemned the Houthi missile attacks launched towards Saudi Arabia's Jizan region. In a statement, the Foreign Office said armed attacks on a civilian population are deplorable. It said Islamabad supports Riyadh against any threat to its security and integrity. On Sunday, 5 civilians were wounded and 3 cars were damaged after Houthi missiles hit Jizan. A Saudi civil defense spokesperson said the missiles targeted civilians protected under international humanitarian law. Moving on, President Ashraf Ghani has renewed his call for an immediate ceasefire in Afghanistan. Clashes between government forces and the Taliban have intensified since last week. Virtually addressing the 75th United Nations General Assembly session, Ghani urged the international community to help achieve a sovereign, united and democratic Afghanistan. The president said an urgent end to the violence is the key to giving Afghans a chance to progress. Earlier, Afghan Ministry of Defense accused the Taliban of killing 98 civilians in various attacks over the past 2 weeks. The Taliban have rejected the claim, blaming Kabul for killing civilians instead. Meanwhile, in Doha, both sides are discussing the mechanism of the intra-Afghan negotiations. Meanwhile, Turkey has lashed out at an EU decision to sanction one of its companies for allegedly breaching a UN arms embargo on Libya. In a statement, the Turkish Foreign Ministry said the decision has no value in the eyes of Ankara. The ministry said Brussels' Irene operations is rewarding Khalifa Haftar and punishing the United Nations recognized Libyan government. It said the EU overlooks those countries, including the UAE, which sent weapons to Haftar in violation of the UN embargo. The ministry said this is a clear signal that the European Union is biased. Earlier, the EU imposed sanctions on Turkish, Kazakh and Jordanian companies. Meanwhile, Turkey and Russia have suspended joint patrols of the M4 highway in Syria's Idlib for security reasons. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov made these remarks in an interview. Lavrov said Moscow will resume patrolling of the Syrian highway with Turkey when the situation calms down. Earlier, Russian and Turkish militaries held a joint training drill in the de-escalation zone in Idlib. A spokesperson for the zone's coordination center said the aim of the drill is enhancing coordination between the two militaries. Idlib remains one of the 4 de-escalation zones in Syria established by Russia, Iran and Turkey back in 2017. Now moving on, the United States says it is building a coalition against Russia's Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline. The Nord Stream 2 will carry up to 55 billion cubic meters of gas per year from Russia to Germany. In an interview, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Washington is working to form an alliance to stop the pipeline. Pompeo said Germany must reconsider the project due to the security implications for Europe stemming from dependence on Russian gas. The secretary said he hopes Germany will begin to see the issue. Now, India's coronavirus caseload has surpassed 5.5 million after registering over 75,000 infections in the past 24 hours. The country has recorded 1,053 COVID-19 deaths, taking the toll to nearly 89,000. Globally, the virus has infected more than 31 million people and claimed over 964,000 lives. More in this report.
India, home to 1.3 billion people, continues to be the second worst hit country by the new coronavirus. Despite nearly 100,000 testing positive for the virus daily, the government has eased more and more restrictions, including on-train routes, domestic flights, markets, restaurants, and now visiting the Taj Mahal. Over in China, Roili city of southwest Yunnan province has ended its strict quarantine, but with some exception.
Cinemas, internet cafes, KTVs, bars, public bathhouses, and other places of mass gathering remain closed for now. Other businesses can resume operation under the premise of strictly implementing epidemic prevention and control measures. Schools in the urban areas will resume in batches after September 26. The specific time frame is subject to the notification of the Education Department.
The second wave of the virus has forced many European governments to reconsider stricter measures. After the UK raised the virus alert level to 4, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland leaders are due to meet with Prime Minister Boris Johnson to discuss new restrictions. Spain also says imposing a broader lockdown in Madrid is on the table as coronavirus cases surge in the capital has increased pressure on hospitals.
Madrid is one of the regions that is doing the most PCR tests, more than double of many other European countries. It is in a good situation and therefore we are sure that it is detecting many cases. We cannot know how many, but we are detecting a significant number of these cases. These are very important increases in the Madrid region. And it could be partly due to that, but nonetheless, there is a real increase in transmission and we can see that incidents are still very, very high compared to the other regions, twice as much in others.
The U.S. death toll from COVID-19 is nearing 200,000, accounting for more than 1 in 5 deaths globally. The cumulative number of confirmed infections in Latin America has surpassed 8.72 million. Argentine doctors, nurses, and other medical workers took to the streets of Buenos Aires to protest their government's decision to ease lockdown measures.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 4 more people have died from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the country's death toll has reached 6,424. The ministry said 582 people tested positive for the virus overnight. It said the country conducted the highest number of tests in a single day in the past 24 hours. The ministry said Pakistan now has 7,303 active infections. It said the total confirmed cases have crossed 306,000 mark. The ministry said over 293,000 people have recovered so far. The U.S. Embassy in Bahrain has issued a security alert for its citizens living in the kingdom after it signed normalization deal with Israel. The statement issued by the embassy emphasized U.S. citizens to stay cautious and aware of their personal security. The embassy said citizens should keep a low profile, stay alert in locations frequently visited by Westerners and avoid crowds. The statement also urged U.S. citizens in the country to maintain a high level of vigilance in local events. The security alert comes several days after Bahrain saw protests over the kingdom's decision to sign a peace deal with Israel, which was facilitated by the United States. Now, the U.S. Justice Department has threatened to revoke federal funding to 3 cities that have become the flashpoint of anti-police brutality protest. In a statement, U.S. Attorney General William Barr said the administration will not allow wasting tax money amid threats to the safety of the citizens.
Barr said New York City, Seattle and Portland, Oregon were allowing anarchy and violence on their streets. The United States Justice Department has said all three cities resisted federal law enforcement officials' efforts to intervene and restore order. Meanwhile, in a joint statement, the mayors of the three cities said withholding federal funds was illegal, accusing Washington of playing politics. Often violent demonstration engulfed the country after the killing of unarmed black man George Floyd in police custody on the 25th of May.
More news coming in this bulletin after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's move on with the news stories. Italy has voted to cut the size of its parliament by more than a third. Exit polls of the referendum show more than 67% of the Italians voted in favour of the change. The number of member parliaments in the lower house will be reduced from 634 to 400, and the country's Senate will also be downsized. The referendum was advocated by a part of the governing coalition, the Five Star Movement, to reduce the government expenditures. Five Star Movement said streamlining Parliament will save the country €1 billion over the next 10 years. The changes have to be implemented before the 2023 elections in Italy. The referendum was held alongside a small number of regional elections. Lebanese President Michel Aoun warns the country is going to hell if a new government is not formed soon. In a televised address, Aoun said the positions of rival factions have grown harder. The president said there is no solution on the horizon on the issue of appointing a new cabinet. Aoun said his proposal of annulling sectarian quotas in main ministries has not been accepted. He said the French efforts have faltered as a week has passed after the deadline to form a government. The political deadlock came after Lebanon's previous government's mass resignation in the wake of a deadly explosion in Beirut's port. Now in Mali, former Defence Minister Ban Dao has been named as president of the country's new transition government. Colonel Assimi Goïta, the military leader who seized power last month, is appointed vice president. The president will lead the country for a new month before staging elections and returning Mali to a civilian rule. Dao and Goïta are appointed by a group of 17 electors chosen by the military leaders. The 18-month transitional government is to be inaugurated on the 25th of September. The ruling junta has come under intense pressure from the West African leaders to return power to the civilians. Mali's global partners fear last month's coup will set a dangerous precedent and undermine a fight against militants across the Sahel. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump says his administration will not approve the sale of TikTok if China's ByteDance maintains any control. In an interview, Trump called for Oracle and Walmart to have total control over TikTok, saying he will be watching it closely. His comments came as TikTok disputed the ownership structure that was sketched out by Oracle and the Trump administration. Earlier, ByteDance announced it will own 80% of TikTok Global, a newly made U.S. company that will own most of the app's operations worldwide. A spokesman for TikTok said Oracle and Walmart will hold a 20% stake. Now, the Sangay volcano has paralyzed Ecuador with several strong explosions and ash emissions. Geophysical Institute of Ecuador said the country's active Sangay volcano registered a significant uptick in volcanic activity. President Lenin Moreno has alerted authorities to the ashfall of the Sangay in Guayas, Los Rios, Santa Elena and Bolivar. He said the government has deployed emergency teams to assist citizens, farmers and ranchers. 6 provinces were affected by large explosions and subsequent ash fall from Sangay volcano. Sangay is one of the most active volcanoes in Ecuador, but this amount of ash was never recorded before. Egyptian archaeologists have discovered 2 2,500-year-old stone coffins at the ancient necropolis of Saqqara. Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities said 27 coffins were found at the ancient burial ground that is also home to one of the world's oldest pyramids. In a statement, the ministry said the coffins are ornately painted and covered in hieroglyphs. Saqqara is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. In March, Egypt reopened the Djoser's Step Pyramid, the first pyramid ever built after a 14-year restoration costing nearly $6.6 million. Meanwhile, rescuers in Australia are attempting to save hundreds of stranded whales, hoping to end the country's worst beaching event. The government scientists say as much as 90 of the 270 whales have already died within a day after stranding at the Macquarie Harbour. The scientists, police officials and local fish farmers along with volunteers are involved in the rescue attempt. Experts say the rescue attempt is the hardest they have encountered because of rough waters and remote locations. Aerial footage showed large number of the animals largely prone to a wide sandbar. Chris Kylan, a wildlife biologist, said if the conditions stay the same, the whales can survive quite a few days.
Triage is going to be quite important here. We've got animals spread over a large area and in a really challenging location. So we're going to basically take the animals with the best chance to start with and the ones that we're able to deal with. So some animals may be simply too big or in an unsuitable location to actually deal with. So there'll be a little bit of triage involved.
Well, the pilot whales are a species of oceanic dolphin that grows to 7 meters long and can weigh up to 3 tons. Now, the long frozen region, Arctic, is shifting to an entirely new climate regime after facing escalating trends of ice melt, temperature rise and rainfall delays. The recent ice melting is expected to be the second lowest expanse in 4 decades of record keeping. Details in this report.
Over the past 30 years, the Arctic has warmed at roughly twice the rate than the entire globe, a phenomenon known as Arctic amplification. Most scientists agree that this rapid warming is a sign of human-caused climate change driving up temperatures of Arctic Circle. The solid ice cover has been shrinking to new lows in recent years. Scientists aboard a Greenpeace research vessel say the dwindling ice cover means an uncertain future for animals like seals and polar bears.
It just shows us how rapidly and how profoundly this area is changing. And the Arctic is an incredibly special habitat for so many species. So we know that the distributions of these species is going to change. Some species, unfortunately, will die out in years to come, and others will invade this area. And we really don't know what the impact of these changes are going to be in the future.
A recent study revealed this year Arctic Sea ice lost about 2/3 of its bulk. Much of the thicker ice layer built up over years has long since melted away. Ice coverage is about 31% lower than in a decade after 1979.
The numbers that we're getting in terms of the decrease in sea ice extent every single year put us pretty much on red alert in terms of the level of worry that we have, our concern for the stability of this environment.
Environment experts say changes are occurring faster than climate models have ever predicted. Implementing the necessary reductions in greenhouse gas emissions and reducing global warming are essential to ensure sea ice-packed Arctic.
Now, in business stories, bourses in the Asia-Pacific have tumbled, with major stock markets also seeing declines. Airline stocks plunged as the UK and other countries voiced intentions of reimposing travel restrictions amid soaring infections. South Korea's Kospi declined over 2%, leading the losses among the region's major markets. Hong Kong's Hang Seng slipped fractionally. HSBC saw its stock plunged another 2.5%, while Standard Chartered dropped over 2%. Mainland Chinese stocks were mixed, with the Shanghai Composite down and the Shenzhen Component up marginally. The ASX 200 in Australia also slipped over 0.5%. Overall, the MSCI Asia ex-Japan index dipped over 0.5%. Markets in Japan remain closed due to a national holiday. Now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. With the weather updates, we come to the end of this bulletin. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.